Good evening. Welcome to Uncivil Disobedience. I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. With me, as always, my co-host and partner in crime, Kennedy Cooper. How are you tonight, Kennedy?
Doing okay. Hanging in there. Yet another week into the 20-month pandemic.
I know how you feel. Also with us tonight is our special guest, Elias Cepeda. How are you tonight, Elias?
I'm doing well. Really excited to be on with you, Chris and Kennedy. Thanks for having me.
Oh
It
yeah,
is our
we've been pumped for this one.
It
Me
is
too.
our pleasure. I usually don't do shows that start because of Twitter beefs, but I figure Jonathan Alter is a mainstream enough media figure that it's not just a Twitter beef and we're not punching down.
That's right.
Yeah, I have to agree there. I don't. Where do we even want to start all of this? Do we want to start with some wokeness talk in general? Do we want to get right into? Do we want to get right into the altered situation?
I do think I do think it is a good idea to talk a little bit about what people mean these days when they say woke, because there's been a bit of a cycle. I mean, it started out as something that was very much part of Black culture, and it was something that people said to mean that they understood how things actually worked. They didn't believe that racism was magically gone because of, pro forma civil rights or anything like that. And it was slightly different meaning than we give to it now, even when we mean it in a good way, which almost no one ever does anymore, which is frustrating. But then it moved to, woke means you try to be on the left side of things economically, and you're not racist and you're not homophobic and you don't hate anybody and you like everybody. And it became definitely a sort of identity politics. I'm not bigoted against anyone sort of badge, which is kind of the opposite of what it really meant in the first place and is ironic to think about. And then, of course, now it's become a conservative pejorative. Anybody in socially conservative journalism, no matter how left-wing they claim to be in economics, the moment they start to say woke, you know that they're about to attack something or someone. And it's kind of ridiculous, but it seems to me like the only real translation is, well, people, please stop talking about racism. You're bothering the white people who vote for us. It's just how it feels to me.
Yeah. Definitely seems like there's a relationship too with like this modern era of like cancel culture commentary. And
cancel culture goes with
nature.
Cancel culture goes with wokeness, but can we just say that if cancel culture were real, Fox News wouldn't exist? If cancel culture were real, all these media figures who claim that nobody will talk to them and their careers are gone because they've been canceled would stop seeing their name in print.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's all start with cancel culture isn't real. And the very same people who talk about cancel culture being real are exactly the people who have a problem with too many people being woke.
Elias, I want to hear what you think about cancel culture also. But first, I'll just chime in really quick and say I have the opposite opinion of Chris. Cancel culture is real and it's good.
I wish it were real. If it were real, it would be good.
Now, is it as effective as it should be? No. Is it like the thing? I think the thing that people get wrong about cancel culture a lot is that it's inherently performative, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a cultural signifier first and foremost, and hopefully it will have material consequences. But first and foremost, you're coming together to say, we all agree that culturally we reject this. And that's where it comes from first and foremost. And, with that in mind, I don't know. I just think that it's hard to always translate that into like a meaningful, substantial, long-term, actually limiting someone from doing further damage. But
it did get Jason Johnson off MSNBC for a tiny window.
Yeah, Jeffrey Toobin got canceled for like 6 months for pulling his dick out in a Zoom meeting. I guess that's
something.
That's the period of time that is appropriate according to these people. Is that being canceled? Like, that's where we agree, Chris.
The one thing I will say is that Jeffrey Toobin's name forevermore will have some sort of joke associated to taking his dick out in a Zoom meeting attached to it, regardless of how great or awful his career is.
True that. Elias, you jump in here. What do you think? What do you think about cancel culture?
I'm happy if we can do it. I'm happy to trade with Jeffrey. People can associate my name with taking a dick out during a meeting, even though I've never done it. If I can get his salary for
get his sweet gig.
Yeah, if MSNBC wants to start letting me say what I want to say on there, or CNN does, or the New Yorker, or anything like that, I think that's a fair trade. And so then, no, I think that speaks into the, let's say, at best, impermanence of cancel culture, right? I can't pretend that I have a comprehensive list in front of me, but I certainly can't think off the top of my head of any examples of truly the most people who embody a combination of being the most publicly repugnant and just exploitative and damaging, most powerful people in the world ever facing any material consequences for doing or saying things that hurt people. So I think that what does happen, what is a real phenomenon and a rising one, which is occluded by this kind of this sphere of the supposed left-wing mobs making everyone shout out correct pronouns or be taken to the gallows or whatever, is that right-wing censorship is real and it's bipartisan and it's increasing, and that's what's always been there. That's what always gets people on blacklists. That's what now gets anyone who is a quote-unquote critic of capitalism in the federal government's crosshairs and listed as a domestic extremist. That's what's behind the so-called socialists, even in the House of Representatives right now, calling for more censorship online. That's what's is prompting a Democratic administration to increase what some experts have already said is the largest kind of domestic spying network in human history, under the pretense that we need to protect from yahoos who almost took over the government on January 6th. So that is real. People getting blacklisted for being supposedly communist, or being actually communist, or being revolutionary, or being
let's not even
a woman or queer. That's real.
That's one thing, but like you said, it's critics of capitalism.
Right.
Is how far they've broadened the definition. Like, we've taken Red Scare all the way from like people who had like at least some affiliation with communism. It's not justified to do things to people because of that, but at least that is a clearer link between what they claim to care about. Now it's just critics of capitalism. You could just be online like, I think the stock market's a little broken the way it works right now. They're like, extremist.
And let's be honest. Let's be honest. As ridiculous as the things that the government did in the various Red Scares of our history have been, let's not forget that at one point there was communism in the world that actually wanted to spread the revolution to the rest of the world and not just stay in one place. And a lot of this idea of Red Scare was built on the fact that, yes, there was a demand within the central tenets of socialism and communism to spread that revolution and free all the workers of the world. And obviously, Henry Ford looked at that and said, don't free my workers. Because, I mean, that's how people that rich are.
Yep. Yeah.
I do agree with you all, too. They're saying that it's connected, like the cancel culture panic and the wokeness panic are connected. I mean, I think they absolutely are. And they're connected to their antecedents, right, of the anti-communism or
and there's a third thing connected to both.
Uh-huh.
And it scares me because I think we would agree that we're all in favor of free speech. But going along with the anti-woke thing and the cancel culture thing is a self-declared free speech absolutism that is always there to stand up for some right-winger, but is never there advocating for more communists on NBC.
That's right. That's like the new University of Austin. They're saying this is for free speech and fearlessness. I look forward to seeing how they'll react to like Palestinian liberation movements led by students, organizations, right, or things of that nature. There's a clear limit for. I mean, I am pretty close to a free speech absolutist. I like to believe, but the people that are usually talking about it, you're right. It's absolutely. It's not the same. They usually only vocalize support for Nazis' rights to speak, which I'm fine with too, I guess. But they never want to express support for marginalized people.
Well, I'll be honest. I kind of agree with Karl Popper on at some point you really have to shut the Nazis up. But that said, I would not have a problem with the free speech absolutist position if I really believed, and I'll call some names out here, I don't care. If I really believed that Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald cared about anybody marginalized or on the left, and I saw them advocating more forcefully for those people to have a chance to speak too, I might feel differently about the amount of time they say that racists and Nazis need to have their free speech rights respected.
Yeah, I'm interested to know, and what y'all can tell me what you think too on this. I'm interested to know what's going to happen with this whole University of Austin. Like, what if some students decide that they want to form a Marxist club at the University of Austin? Do you think that the free speech might suddenly find a limit? If the students started like preaching actual Marxist values that were counter to the capitalist nature of the system that they're in.
I'm going to counter with another serious question. Aren't we really jumping the gun by assuming that they might have students? I mean, and I'm not trying to be overly dismissive. It's possible that something is actually happening here. That said, I mean, so far, unless they actually announce buying a campus and funding from various endowments, it's PragerU with some PhDs, right? And let's look at the PhDs. These are people who are worth mentioning on their own. We've got, let me get her name right, Heather Hiring, who is the wife. This is another chance to mention him on a show. The wife of Brett Weinstein, of course. And they used to be on the same evolutionary biology faculty at Evergreen College, and they both left for the same politically motivated reasons by which their students didn't like that they were racist around the same time, and started YouTubing and claimed to be left-leaning libertarians, but they're a lot more libertarian than they are left-leaning, and they pump out a whole lot of right-wing stuff. So it's just fascinating who some of the PhDs associating themselves with this are, because Heather Hiring and Brett Weinstein were some of the earliest people to put Robert Malone on to talk about how the vaccine is going to kill you. That's who's joining the University of Austin. Heather Hiring.
All right, if they get this University of Austin thing off the ground, every leftist, we need to all put in applications. We need to all just hammer them nonstop and then default on every payment.
See, now that's a good plan. That could be fun. That could be very fun.
But yeah,
So
it definitely just has Trump University vibes to me.
Big time.
You know, I was thinking PragerU, but that's a really good point. Because the one fundamental thing that the far right has that binds all its members and leaders from the past to now together is they're all a bunch of grifters. In the big KKK revival of the 1920s, the Grand Wizard of Indiana also conveniently had a monopoly on dry cleaners in the state. So the guy who made sure that people in Indiana had a reason to wear white sheets, owned all the dry cleaners.
It's always that cynical, isn't it?
And after William Pierce, the horrible, horrible person who wrote the Turner Diaries and ran the National White People's Party, oh my gosh. After he died, his organization was taken over by two grifters who were competing over who could embezzle more from the party. And it split off into two different parties, with each of the two new leaders accusing the other of having stolen from the party. And they were both telling the truth about each other. They both stole. This is what all these people on the far right have in common. So when you talk about the possibility of a Trump university, my brain goes, I should have thought of that. But yeah, no. And then, so Jonathan Alter, I'm going to give the background there, and then we can get into everything else. If necessary, we can pull up tweets. But basically, he was on Morning Joe on Friday and was trying, I guess, to sound tough on TV. Whatever he really meant, he wasn't going to say, but he was very offended by my guessing that he meant what most people mean when they refer to woke BS. But he was talking about good old Terry McAuliffe's dismissal of the idea that parents had any rights or say over what was their kids were being taught in school with, well, the Democratic Party needs to get back on the side of the parents and cut out this woke BS. At which point I speculated that he meant what most people mean when they say that, which is, when you talk about racism, it offends me and my white friends.
I'm taking off. I'll be back in an hour.
Okay, babies. Sorry about that. But that's how it sounded to me. He did not appear to think so when Elias called attention to it. Tell me about that K-12, because I'm curious about this background now.
Cool. Yeah. No, I'll give that. That was just me being trying to be mean to him, and then I'll get into the substance. I have plenty of substantive stuff that we were talking about too. But yeah, so Jonathan Alter went to a school called Francis W. Parker, and years later, I went to that school as well. I went there from middle school through high school. It actually goes from junior kindergarten all the way through high school. I didn't live in the neighborhood it was in. got kind of driven out of my neighborhood there every day. But it's in one of the more affluent neighborhoods in America. It is, short of like an East Coast boarding school type of thing. It's one of the more expensive types of places. At its best, though, it has a pedagogy that is, in addition to being totally bourgeois and serving mostly, the richest of the rich, including some of the, Chicago and Illinois' oldest billionaire families. In addition to that, it has a pedagogy that is ostensibly rooted in Dewey, John Dewey philosophy and Deweyites and Deweyism, and it's named after a guy, Francis Parker, who ascribed to that, and his first principal was Floyd J. Cook, was ascribed to that as well. And it's this whole idea that we need to teach children how to become future active participants in democracy and society by giving them opportunities to live that democracy out in life and in the daily life, and at school, to emphasize his critical thinking and all that type of stuff. So I said that he was an embarrassment to Chicago, where I'm from and where he's from, and also I said to Parker, and I'm quite certain that's the only reason he also tagged me back in it as well. Because I mean, listen, it's at its worst, it's a bougie place, and it's a kind of a breeding ground for the elite, by the elite. But at its best, it at least on paper tries to ascribe, and many of the fine teachers there try to actually in practice ascribe to some real notions of equity, some real critical thinking about the United States, and at least a bare minimum of compassion. Where I think Alter is really off the deep end with these types of comments. And I'll jump into that whenever. But that's Parker. That's where we went. That's where I went. I said he was an embarrassment to that school as well as the whole city.
and that was what apparently got his attention, because not too long after that, somebody showed me, oh look, and I think it was you again, actually, Elias. But he had quote tweeted me and tagged us both.
Yeah, he was only quoting you, but he tagged me too. He wanted me to see that, in fact, no, he is the pride of Chicago and the pride of the Francis W. Parker School.
Only he never did. He tried to walk it back.
Yeah.
He said we have to defend the correct teaching of history.
Right.
And
he tries to have it both ways, right? He said he
really
uses
did.
racist dog whistles, and then when someone notices it, he's like, "Well, no, of course that's not what I'm saying." No different than anything Donald Trump or Joe Biden would do.
But when I asked him what he meant then by woke BS, he started quote tweeting other people who responded to that thread and ignoring me.
Yep, he can't actually elaborate on it. I noticed that. It's
because there's an implication there that he doesn't want to say out loud. When you say we got to connect with the parents and cut out this woke BS, you're implying that the average American parent kind of leans conservative, which is not true. It's a lot more complicated than that. And you're kind of, but what are you really saying? It's like, well, what you're really saying is we're going to cater to the conservative parents.
I mean, and let's be really honest. When you assume that everybody is as racist as you, or as homophobic as you, or as transphobic, pick your poisonous hate. When you assume that everybody else is like that too, you give yourself a license to say certain things. And when you are suddenly reminded, oh no, not everyone is really like that, then you suddenly have to try to snap back to polite society mode. And I really think he thought he was in a safe space on Morning Joe and sort of forgot it was on television.
No, that's great. I think that's right. Yeah. And to what you open up, Chris, talking about woke as historically like an important watchword in the American Black revolutionary traditions. So, off the bat, any non-Black person dismissing it and derisively is racist. Period. They're mocking Black American intellectualism, activism, and Black fights for survival if they're just going to flippantly toss aside and then derisively and not elaborate. But even if we didn't care about that, there's actually I don't believe there's any evidence for the argument, right? So all main leftist positions in the U.S. right now, from whatever, nationalized healthcare, defunding our prison complex, decriminalizing drugs, cutting down the war complex, saving the earth, taking our money back from billion-dollar corporations. These all and many others have widespread support among people identifying with all parties and people who don't identify with any parties. But let's say that wasn't true, right? Let's say even that wasn't true, and these weren't popular ideas. This woke BS stuff, including racial justice, wasn't popular. There's still moral positions, and absent from his analysis was any consideration for what is right and what is wrong. And that's all on top of Jonathan Alter acting as though he has any qualifications to act as to talk as an elections expert. He has no experience that would give us a reason to give his words weight about a national or statewide elections. So that's a little bit weird. But most importantly, just don't consider what is right and wrong. This is a mercenary look at politics that is narrow, and because they only look at elections, and then their analysis there is incomplete and not really data driven. But they really don't care. They just want to. They really feel that this type of stuff is important, and I think that's even pretense. I think they just have the same type of corporate interest that the Republicans do, and that's ultimately what they want to stand behind. But this whole notion, I feel I think this whole notion that if liberals like him, in the Democratic Party, just impersonate conservatives well enough because they're afraid of conservative talking points like critical race theory or whatever. That type of stuff, they're saying that's their key to success, or their key to success, the Democratic Party. That's what they've always done in my lifetime, and that's what's seen them lose support from many different states and from populations. It's also what's depressed turnout, I believe, a large part of it among key demographics and key places like in Wisconsin near here. Terry McAuliffe ran on the type of stuff, for the most part, that Jonathan Alter wants. I understand that he was offended by this, questioning parents, but for the most part, he ran in exactly the type of stuff that Jonathan Alter wants, and ignored leftist woke BS type of positions, and he lost. He lost with it.
Let's address the elephant in the room. Both Jonathan Alter and Terry McAuliffe are individuals who have deep, deep, deep political ties to Bill Clinton, and by association, Hillary Clinton. And so
absolutely.
When have the Clintons ever been woke in any but the most superficial and politically convenient ways?
And you might think we're making too big of a deal out of the Clintons, but they basically invented the new Democrat model of politics.
Let's be fair.
Everybody, these people are all made in the image of that kind of thinking for the most part. And that kind of thinking is you're only performatively woke when it's convenient.
Let's not give the Clintons too much credit, which is not to say that the Clintons are not bastards. They are. But the bastards who created that new Democratic Party that we're talking about. So Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was the original neoconservative and neoliberal, worked for LBJ. And I don't remember how long it was after, but I like to say the day after LBJ was sworn in after being elected in his own right in 1964, and day after he was sworn in in 1965, the very first thing waiting on his desk in 1965 was the Moynihan Report. And he had just passed the Civil Rights Act as part of Kennedy's legacy. And the Moynihan Report was sitting there on his desk and basically blaming black people for their own poverty in a racist country. And it's really important to understand that in that sense, that the Democrats were pulling right again from the moment LBJ signed the most serious left-wing stuff in our history. They were immediately trying to pull back right again, right away. The Moynihan report is dated 65, so I may be exaggerating when I say it was waiting for him after he was inaugurated, but, really close.
Yeah. I think we also have to discuss the fact that there is this way that this is framed by the Democratic leadership that, listen, we can't be too progressive. That's losing us these elections. You can't say that unless you actually pass one progressive policy, Joe Biden.
Yeah.
I'm setting the bar right here. It's nice and low. One progressive policy.
He's going to say, Joe Biden is going to say that removing Trump's ban on trans people in the military was progressive. Kennedy, aren't you glad you can join the military again now?
I'm so thrilled. I've been waiting for this.
Yeah, so you see my point. That's what Biden is going to claim his progressive legacy is. Right. You just watch.
It's Colin Powell progressivism, right? You can advance by agreeing to go kill marginalized people in other parts of the world. That's progress.
Mm-hmm.
Sign up.
And that's really what Joe Biden is selling. I mean, we've been replacing our actual welfare state with the military industrial complex and the prison industrial complex since Reagan. Clinton just really made it official.
Yeah. Here, Joe Biden, I'm going to set the bar even lower.
So
just
what
give
woke
us a strong public option. And then you can claim that you were too progressive for the conservatives.
He couldn't even deliver a strong public option as vice president.
They didn't even try. It wasn't really on the table in either case. They negotiated that away before they even got to the negotiating table.
They let first Ben Nelson and then Joe Lieberman make it go away.
Yeah.
And what's really funny, and I love to call attention to this, if you're looking for proof that the Democrats lose on purpose, this is the proof. So in 2009, Arlen Specter, this is the last time a Republican seriously did this. And what happened to him is why, I'm sure. But in 2009, Arlen Specter broke from the Republican Party to vote with the Democrats on Obama's first stimulus bill. And it was a big deal. The Republicans were really angry at him. They picked Pat Toomey to run against him in a primary in Pennsylvania. And Arlen Specter didn't want to take on a Republican primary challenger, and he switched parties. He became a Democrat then and there. And the Democrats primaried him. He had guaranteed them not just their majority, but, an extra one, something that made it harder for their majority to go away. The insurance for Ted Kennedy, so to speak, who everybody knew at that point was dying anyway. And the Democrats primaried him. And because it was a Democratic primary, the guy the Democratic Party put up won the primary. And naturally, that guy lost to Pat Toomey in the general election. And, Republicans have been senators in Pennsylvania for a long time ever since. How long did it take for Bob Casey to get in? I mean, but that was the last time that a Republican seriously broke from his own party. And the Republicans did everything they could to hand Arlen Specter to the Democrats as someone who not only would vote with them, but would now be poised to be even more liberal than he would have been just as a single crossover vote, because now he was pissed at the Republicans. And they deliberately stepped on it themselves. I'm not saying I'm an Arlen Specter Democrat by any means. I'm not. Arlen Specter was kind of a right-winger in a lot of ways. He was a Biden guy on criminal justice. We can't forget that. But he was somebody who absolutely would have voted for health care to piss off the other Republicans after what happened. And the Democrats didn't even consider that. They just primaried him with their guy who lost to Toomey. And I'm sorry, I think Arlen Specter beats Toomey in a general election in 2010.
Well, I mean, we know a lot of elections come down to a relatively small margin of,
yes,
there's a few points on this side or a few points on that side, and we're just working with a couple of percentages. That's it. And so if you are a liked in your district figure that switches parties, that's potentially a really powerful asset because you only need to drag a few voters over from the other side to potentially flip a district in a lot of cases. So it's really ridiculous from a perspective of, do they want to win?
And from the cutthroat, we'll do whatever we have to win perspective that Democrats like to claim to have. That was just stupid.
Yeah. Well, you talked about grifting earlier, right? And the right wingers being grifters. Well, obviously, like Democratic Party for the most part is a right wing party, and
yes,
I think that's the grift they have going on now. I think we need to, and I'm preaching to the choir here, I'm sure, but to talk about these things with clear eyes, we need to really define clearly what winning is to the Democratic Party and who their constituents, their true constituents are. At this point, for especially the ones in power, the party itself and the corporation that is their national committee, winning or losing elections doesn't really, or I should put it this way, losing elections doesn't affect their fundraising in a negative way. It actually can positively impact it, right? And as long as they're able to fundraise off of being in a supposed opposition, they're doing all right. Whether or not some lowly congressperson wins or loses, they're gonna do all right, right? And their true constituents are the corporations that they serve. So as long as they keep them happy, they'll be all right. So they don't want to win elections. They win by fundraising, by keeping the revolving door to the private sector going for their members. And that's important to realize. We have an inverted totalitarian system, according to Sheldon Wolin, and I think he was right about that. This is like we have democratic forms right now, but the true systems don't care at all about that. They just don't. To think that Democrats care about winning misses the point, because people always ask, are they just this dumb, or are they stupid, or are they unwise? It's like it just doesn't have an effect on them. But Terry McAuliffe is going to be fine. It doesn't really matter.
Terry McAuliffe was set for life after he was DNC chair. He never needed to run for governor of Virginia. That was gravy for him.
Absolutely.
Stacey Abrams was nominated for a Nobel Prize off the back of losing.
It's true.
Just her political career she lost a big election. Somehow that has made her a top Democrat.
I hate to admit it, but I know I'm also not the only person who felt this way. There were people who were Bernie people who were like, yeah, Stacey Abrams for a little while.
Yep.
Not for very long, but she was someone who was taken seriously as maybe a progressive for a little while.
Yeah, and a lot of others too. I mean, this is me speaking out of turn and stuff, but I feel like
Go ahead.
I see this anecdotally, but like good-hearted white folks get excited about the people that they're told are progressives if they're people of color, because they don't want to have no women in office, or no queer people in office, or no black or brown people or indigenous people in office. They know that's bad. They want that there, and they're hoping for progressivism. They're hoping for change in the system. And I think they get a little doe-eyed when they see some of these folks, and they might forget. I don't know. I have no idea where you all stand on her, and I don't think she's the saint or the devil. But they might forget, for example, that who was the woman from Ohio, the former state senator that just lost. She just ran again, but she was a surrogate for Bernie Sanders.
Oh, Nina Turner.
Nina Turner, thank you. Yeah, Nina Turner. I mean, listen, like you can like Nina Turner, it's okay, but she's a career politician from a police family who is like all sorts of fraught positions, who now makes a living off of like corporate DNC cash, right? Like Stacey Abrams is bad on all sorts of issues. Like they're just a little too excited, about people without really testing them. It's like, it's like many of us were with Barack Obama. I came again. Let's bring this back to my
bring it back to Chicago.
Bring it back to Chicago and bring it back to my school. I remember being like, people were like, oh, they were excited about it's like 2004, and he was running for a Senate here. And at that point, I was in college. I was a couple years out of high school. There were a lot of people at that school because Barack Obama had. I mean, this is my opinion, and I could be dead wrong, and others will disagree. He will disagree. Barack Obama, as far as I could tell, at the time had big support from the Lakeshore liberals of Chicago, long before he had widespread support among Black Chicagoans. He lost against Bobby Rush when he tried to go federal off the bat. Former Black Panther, longtime congressperson. He kind of Barack Obama shot for the swing for the fences there and got shut down. And he had a lot of support from people like at the school I went to. And I remember a lot of people they're like, oh, I'm so excited. I remember, we saw Barack came to my parents' house like 3 months ago. We're so excited for him, and they're supporting him. And he really, at best, really made no affirmative promises of anything even liberal in his Senate campaign, in his presidential campaigns. And we ignored things. A lot of us ignored things like his present vote on abortion rights in the Illinois state legislature, because we were like, well, we know politics. He can't really talk about all the good stuff. We've got to just get him in there. We know Barack, he'll do great. Or he seems like, transformational or whatever, because he's one of like 4 Black people I know. And it's just, it's really sad. But I see that happen. And this happens a lot. I'll get in less trouble talking about when this happens with Latin politicians, right? We've got someone in Congress now after a long political career, Jesus Chuy Garcia, who's now a congressperson, and he has a reputation as a progressive that I would argue, this is a different and larger conversation, is largely undeserved and a little bit flimsy, but people assume the best of him, and he's written that all the way to the United States Congress. His predecessor, Luis Gutierrez, did as well, and it's this really strange thing to see, because a lot of times I've noticed here in Chicago, people like both of them, they get their most ardent support, their most vocal support, they get their awards from largely like white liberal organizations who really don't interrogate their records and what they've done for their people.
You mentioned Bobby Rush. Bobby Rush was a Black Panther. How much has his career in Congress resembled the Black Panthers?
Yeah, right.
And
he's
and
no
that's
longer a Panther.
Barbara.
That way. It's like the Weather Underground people are all like political advisors and Harvard professors.
Yeah, Saul Alinsky ended up an Obama advisor. Tom Hayden ended up a reasonably conservative Democratic congressman. It's just, it's so weird. But then you have to remember is that these guys, the Weather Underground people were never working class. Let's put it that way. The Weather Underground people and the wider Students for a Democratic Society movement did a lot of good things and had a lot of good ideas and had a lot of internal problems too. But while they really did put down working class seeds that grew roots, I don't know how many people still know this. The Young Patriots, who were one of the Rainbow Coalition groups with the Black Panthers, were founded by a couple of guys who had been radicalized by a Students for a Democratic Society project, where they went out and they talked to working class white people about why they shouldn't be racist and about socialism. And some folks who had been talking to these sort of socialist missionaries with the Students for a Democratic Society ended up becoming working class socialists and founding the Young Patriots and joining the Rainbow Coalition when Fred Hampton started it. So, I mean, I'm not trying to put down the good stuff that they did, but it wasn't they weren't working class. It wasn't a serious working class movement. They were rich kids who were in love with the bourgeois idea of justice rather than having a serious interest in communism itself.
Yeah, I think ultimately, right? Yeah, you see radicals become liberals in late age, and that's fine. But I think it's totally fair to point out that ultimately there's class solidarity there, and if they don't come from working class backgrounds, and they did, I mean, at least not like Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn. They didn't, and I like them. I have a lot of respect for them, and I think they're still. I don't know if they're still working professors, but I think they were at where I went to undergrad. But yeah, I mean, they're from wealthy families that ultimately, Dr. Ayers' dad helped him, not get in trouble. That's why he's a professor and not like a political prisoner to this day in large part, right? So it's very fair to point that out, that for all their virtues, they're not working class soldiers, and that's okay, but they're not working class soldiers.
and honestly, the reason that they went on, that they've had such successful post Weather Underground or post Students for a Democratic Society careers is because they had that class cushion to fall back on.
Sure.
When you look at the more working class socialists of that same era, well, most of them are dead or in prison or still running some sort of fringe group. Bradavikian was one of those guys. He was a little more working class. He's still running the Revolutionary Communists, despite them being. They're less likely to start a revolution tomorrow than DSA, and that's saying something. But they're still trying. That's important too.
Yep.
And I finally found
the effort, yeah.
I finally found a reason to mention Bradavikian on a stream. I'm proud of myself.
I think the issue when you don't have the actual working class, like structures and understanding, like going into that kind of organizing, is that when you know that you can just fall back on some golden parachute, you don't build the kind of resilient organizing structures that could actually cause a revolution. You just don't. You can't do it. You can't do it for as long as you're just planning on, I'm just going to go work at Dad's Cadillac dealership when all this is over. The actual revolutions, when they get done, tend to involve working class people like building dual power for up to a decade or more just to get to the point where something like that could conceivably happen.
Or people choosing.
You're not going to do it from college on daddy's money.
Or people choosing to deliberately entrench themselves in a more working class viewpoint. Because let's be honest, Lenin and Trotsky were not working class soldiers either. They were bougie guys who did fall in love with communism instead of some bougie idea of justice, and who really went to a lot of effort to try to make it real, and to a certain extent tried to immerse themselves in a working class revolutionary viewpoint and built deeper structures. You can say what you want about the USSR and what Russian communism ended up being. You can approve, disapprove, your mileage may vary. But Lenin and Trotsky accomplished something that hadn't been accomplished yet at that point.
Yeah, class. I welcome class traders. That's a wonderful thing. Right, like you can do some positive things with that privilege for certain. Yeah.
No, for
most don't.
sure. But if you know in the back of your mind that you're just going to daddy's Cadillac dealership when it's all said and done, that's where I find the
Yeah,
issue,
you gotta
know?
you gotta burn
And-
the ships behind you for sure.
Well,
You gotta
right?
exactly. You gotta
Yeah.
And
you
that's
gotta burn the fleet behind you, burn the
Yeah.
port,
that's
the whole thing.
that's really the difference. Is that, I mean, Trotsky was sent to Siberia and escaped from the gulag in Siberia. So basically, he escaped prison with nothing. I don't know if you can sever yourself further from your bougie roots than to escape prison with nothing.
That's right.
So yeah, no, that stuff's important. Which takes us back to Jonathan Alter, who is really, really not severed himself from his bougie roots. As mentioned, he was a Clinton guy. He still very much represents that part of the party that really wants a president who sort of keeps all the more liberal and lefty elements of the party in their place. And I think that's a problem in the Democratic Party as a whole. People have, because there are so many people like that in the Beltway, these conservative Democrats who are afraid of losing too much to blacker or browner or younger, more progressive rivals. It really feels like a lot of this conservative is them projecting what they want onto the electorate and then giving bad advice to the people actually running for office.
True. I think the being so out of touch with folks, it's, you mentioned earlier, Chris, too. You're like, if you assume the rest of everyone else is just as racist as you and you get called up on it, it's like discombobulating. And I think that's certainly true. I think it's also possible that they're unaware of their racism, because their racism is not the type of thing that they think is racism, right? And I'm painting with a really broad brush here, and I feel comfortable doing so. But yeah, they could also, I think they really have these notions, these notions of the unwashed masses, and they assume that, well, I'm not racist, right? That's a territory they think is it can be occupied, not racist. But I'm not racist, but I know most white people are. They're not like me. They're not as erudite and urbane as me, and so we have to appeal to them. That's just an unfortunate reality. I think that's like the most good faith, but very, very wrong. People might feel that sincerely, and that still is a problem. If the most of the type of journalism we've done is like Jonathan Alter, which is get paid a lot of money to write your opinion, but you're never in contact with other working class white people. He's not in contact with them. If he was good faith, and I'm not certain he was good faith, he could have all sorts of erroneous assumptions about working class white people as well, and how they're only to be appealed to by hatred.
The number one misconception that people of Jonathan Alter's sort of favored professional status in life have, the number one misconception they have is that these sort of petty bourgeois people they deal with on a day-to-day basis are actually working class.
True. Yeah, right.
And so they have this idea that their barber or their dentist or their plumber, all these people who are in business for themselves and providing services for them and equal enough to them that they're doing business on a personal level. They're under the impression that these folks are working class and that that's who the working class is. And they don't really have any conception of what it's like to really be working class.
Yeah, you ever met a celebrity dentist? A lot of celebrity dentists make more than the celebrities that they service.
Yeah.
On
Let's
average.
not even talk about celebrity dentists. So professionals, lawyers, doctors, dentists, business people, anybody with the sort of white collar professional accreditation that is worth more money when you get a job. So some of them are really rich. And it's not always even what you think of. There was a line, the difference between old money and new money. New money is oil well rich, gold mine rich, tech tycoon rich, and old money is doctor rich, lawyer rich, college professor rich. And that's nowadays that generational wealth. A lot of those new money people have now become old money people. And so now you have your second and third and fourth generation oil barons. So that's been inverted. But that was very much true once. And these newly wealthy people were much, much richer than the old rich. And that was the original splitting point between the people who became the Democrats and the people who became the Republicans, is that these old money people who were a little less rich, but a lot more cultured as they saw it than the really, really rich people, were siding with the working class and Wall Street in order to rein in these upstarts. And that was how you had FDR and the first real bout of liberalism in the Democratic Party, and the New Deal and the post-World War II efforts to various degrees to keep the New Deal going or expand on it. And that was good. I'm not saying that wasn't better for people than what came before it, but that was very much this sort of deal of convenience between entrenched wealthy professionals and the working class to overthrow these corporate robber barons.
Yeah. I think I forgot what I was even going to say. Forget it. Elon Musk is old money now.
Yes.
That emerald mine, it becomes old money.
Well,
I do remember that. But I don't remember the rest of my point.
His father gave him the emerald mine. Somebody actually tried to give me that. Well, he came to the country with nothing. No, he came to the country with the proceeds of an emerald mine that his father gave him.
An apartheid era emerald mine, no less.
Oh, well, and I found out the weirdest and most disturbing thing the other day, which is that Jeffrey Wright, of all people, owns a gold mine in Sierra Leone.
Wow.
And has bragged about the work he has done with De Beers in order to lift up Africans out of poverty.
Jeffrey Wright, the actor?
Yes.
Oh, geez.
The voice of Dell Computers now.
Oh, is that right?
It's important to have these discussions about some of this stuff, about like these misconceptions about who is and isn't working class, because this stuff filters all the way down to stupid discussions on Twitter between leftists. This same mentality that causes these rich people to look at their dentist, who actually might make more than them in some cases, or at the very least also lives a really comfortable lifestyle if you're a dentist for rich people. Like look at them and think, wow, I live a powdered glove lifestyle. This guy works with his hands. That's working class, right?
Yeah.
And then that filters all the way down to like the incredibly foolish discussion that happens on Twitter every 3 months of like, if you drive a truck, you're working class. If you sit at a computer, you're bouge, regardless of pay scale. Like that's how we get this stuff ingrained in, is through these misconceptions.
So one of the and I'm glad you mentioned driving a truck, because there are several kinds of truck drivers. There are working class truck drivers who work for a company and get paid by a company, they get a paycheck. And then you have owner operators who are petty bourgeois, at least. Sometimes they do well for themselves and set up companies that employ other people to drive their trucks, even if they still drive a truck themselves or not. And then you have people who work steady full time for one employer, and it's even more. They don't even work for the trucking company. They work for UPS or Amazon, whoever, and they're pay-ons basically. But all of these differences sort of meld together in the mind of the rich professional.
And if it melds together in their mind and they dictate our media culture, then it might meld together in your mind if you're not thinking about it very closely. And then that's
so true, right? Like, why are leftists? Why would left-leaning people be arguing about those cultural markers on Twitter? That's so silly. That's like it's adopting the framing and the language of 1990s Republicans talking about latte liberals. Like, it's the same type of nonsense that definitely doesn't get into actual material.
Only you know who talks about latte liberals now, just to show how we've transitioned.
Yeah.
Now latte liberals is the pet term of contempt of Al Sharpton when he's sitting there basically playing the, oh no, this guy Joe Scarborough isn't racist, I agree with him game.
Wow. I haven't kept up enough with him because now he has a regular show, right, for MSNBC.
He has Politics Nation on Sunday afternoons.
Wow, you're a patient man to watch these.
I watch Morning Joe every morning because it's something easy to do while I'm waiting to go to work, and honestly, because it's great material for Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, what is better to dissect and analyze and make fun of than this total beltway ruling class breakfast club, which is what it is.
Talking about regular people and what regular people want.
Yes. I mean, and I love them. I love Anand Girinandis, and I love Eddie Glaude Jr., but they're still really successful guys at the pinnacles of their fields.
For sure.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just that's who they are. They're able to make certain decisions in their lives, politically speaking, because they have a certain level of comfort. And so, hey, I understand. If you're Anand Girinandis, I mean, Bernie Sanders doesn't seem very nice, I guess. And even Bernie Sanders, even though he talked about the working class more than any other Democrat has in forever, I mean, Bernie Sanders is a middle class guy with a mostly middle class platform. And the Democrats were left of Bernie Sanders in 1978. And now Bernie Sanders is far to the left of the Democratic Party. And of course, Bernie Sanders was left of Bernie Sanders in 1978 too, but that's a whole different subject.
Right. Angela Merkel's to the left of Bernie Sanders on a host of issues. Dwight Eisenhower exited the White House to the left of Bernie Sanders rhetorically on American Empire. So yeah, you're right. Hey, we're truly moving rightward.
And if we're going to go by taxes and solely go by the highest marginal tax rate in American history, then there's no president more liberal than Dwight Eisenhower.
Right.
And
that's not even, we can't even conceive of that, which is still within a capitalist framework, right? It's still very much, it keeps every institution and system in place. It's oppressive and stuff.
Dwight Eisenhower had two nightmares. The first nightmare was John Birch Society Republicans. The whole reason that Dwight Eisenhower ran for president was to stop the John Birch Society from getting Douglas MacArthur the Republican nomination. His whole reason for running as a Republican was the mindset that if he beat MacArthur in the primary, then MacArthur couldn't become president even if he lost.
Yeah.
And he cared more about MacArthur not being president than about being president himself. Now, obviously, of course, because he was the guy who won World War II, and because he was running not against Harry Truman, he won rather easily. But he had the right idea. Beat Douglas MacArthur in the primary, and even if I lose, he's not going to be president. And before that, he had never registered for a political party, and he had only ever voted once, which was in 1944, because, of course, the war was going on, and he felt it was his patriotic duty to vote for Roosevelt during the war. But that was the only time he voted his entire life. And that was for a Democrat, but then he ran as a Republican because, hey, no, I'm. But then when you look at his actual policies, I mean, there's bad stuff there too. The horribly named Operation W word was carried out by the Border Patrol under Dwight Eisenhower. And that should not be forgotten. We get a little nostalgic for the Eisenhower days sometimes, but that shouldn't be forgotten. And it also shouldn't be forgotten that we still had Jim Crow under Dwight Eisenhower. And while Dwight Eisenhower did send the National Guard to integrate the schools, he wasn't super enlightened himself on race. He just did not think that the people of one state should be breaking the law.
And the coup in Iran as well. Like, yeah, no, certainly a lot of bad stuff.
Guatemala.
Yeah.
All sorts of bad stuff came from Guatemala because we took over Guatemala on their own with some help from us. That Guatemalan junta took over El Salvador. That El Salvadoran government became very, very, very infamous. There's a Peter, Paul, and Mary song about them. And then, the Contras in Nicaragua were spawned directly out of the El Salvadoran junta trying to take over Nicaragua and help out the constitutional liberals who lost. The Constitutional Liberal Party, aka the Contras, lost to Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua again.
It's a fight that's still being waged this week, basically.
Yeah. And
Ortega just officially won the election recently.
The propaganda continues on, there was so much talk about this election being corrupt in Nicaragua coming out in the mainstream media. And whenever there's talk of an election being corrupt, and you realize that, like, you don't remember the last time the mainstream media has talked about the place in question, you should wonder about that, because when's the last time CNN ran an article about Nicaragua, but then this week they're like, hey, those elections are shady, and you're like, oh, what?
So there are two shady things which are worth mentioning. Shady thing number one is that Ortega has bent several rules of both the Constitution and his own party to continue heading the ticket himself.
Sure.
And questionable thing number two is that Daniel Ortega has kind of been siding with the neoliberals on some key issues as far as his economy goes. and that hasn't been super good for everybody. But it's worth noting that the worst thing that Daniel Ortega has done in Nicaragua is cooperate some with Western capitalists.
Yeah.
I mean, I always love to point this out anytime I can. Angela Merkel not clearing the bar set by Daniel Ortega in terms of straightforward politics.
Well, forget Angela Merkel. American politicians don't clear the Daniel Ortega bar. I'm sorry. I mean, look at our elections. Can you guys honestly say you wouldn't feel just a little bit better with UN monitors?
Yeah.
I mean, if the Iowa state Democratic primary had happened in any other country in the world, the U.S. would have invaded.
No, it's bad. You're right. I mean, I think structurally we don't have anything resembling democracy. Certainly not in these primaries, which is there's just no regulation really about what needs to be happening.
Iowa State caucus.
Yeah, caucus. You're right. The caucuses, the primaries. None of these. There's no real standards. The debates themselves are moderated by corporations that are sponsored by private industry and all that stuff. But even by our own standards, if we accept like this is fine, even by our own standards, it's getting real funky, right? Like what happened with this time with the caucuses and that app being used, just the fact that we have everything, almost all voting is digitized, that we have erratic poll closings that we had in 2000 elections, like the Florida police closed down certain highway sections to inhibit Black people from getting to the polls, and the Secretary of State who was overseeing the election, whose job was to oversee the election, was a campaign chair statewide for George W. Bush. Like that's not illegal in our system. We have the things almost needing to go to the House of Representatives. We had what amounts to a judicial coup in 2000 in the general election. We've got a candidate who's losing, saying the campaign was stolen. They're still campaigning on that, even by our own meager Democratic standards. Things are getting really messy right now.
Let's go back to the thing that was completely lost in all the noise about Russiagate. But in 2016, the FBI basically elected Donald Trump president. First, there were the leaks out of the New York office saying that, oh, Hillary, you got to check this stuff out. Hillary, which was what led to Comey opening up the investigation again. And then you had Comey's little speech where after the investigation was closed, despite the fact that, and I hate to use these words, because Hillary Clinton is not my favorite person, but in a speech where James Comey essentially said we exonerated Hillary Clinton, he went on to heavily cover how amoral and wrong and bad he thought she was, even though she didn't break the law. Sure. Now, I don't disagree with that judgment of Clinton's morality and ethics, but I question the ethics of the chief of the FBI saying this during an election.
Well, he's from the FBI.
So, yeah, no, and
right. Yeah. I mean, the FBI did their part, right? They certainly did. Legacy media did their part by building up this myth of Donald Trump for 30 years and never interrogating his racism and pedophilia. And like Hillary Clinton did her part by having horrible policy positions and not visiting Wisconsin. But yeah, the FBI certainly did their part.
Well, there were real feuds between the FBI and the Clintons in the 90s.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. With all those raids and stuff. And they made, the FBI look pretty bad. No, there's no doubt.
He fired Pete Sessions, who, despite being kind of a crook, was also very popular with a lot of people in the FBI at the time.
Well, these are long grudges, right? And that's That's
Bill
why,
Sessions,
whether or not we call it the deep state or whatever, but there's a bureaucratic class that outlasts any presidential administration. They have long memories, and they try to exert their influence.
And
you're certainly right.
And the FBI sort of stepped out there and did its thing and pushed Hillary Clinton away from the Oval Office and essentially put Trump into it. And then, of course, Trump immediately started feuding with Comey, and all of that sort of disappeared in a way that really bought Comey way too much forgiveness from way too many people.
For certain. And they found that, Democrats are not going to go against the FBI. They're going to, have them and other, other representatives of other awful agencies on an NBC all the time. They'd rather put in prison and torture Julian Assange and blame him for it, just like they wanted to blame, Ralph Nader or whatever, right? These are not really borne out by any evidence, but they'd much rather make him a villain than, James Comey, who went on and did all the late night talk shows and stuff like that, and was seen as a hero just because Donald Trump ended up not liking him later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And being disliked by Donald Trump made people heroes.
Yeah, I mean, that's right.
Near the end of that run there, the liberals were so desperate for people to turn into heroes that John Bolton was transformed into a liberal resistance hero.
Isn't that ridiculous? Of all people,
if you want to become one of the leading liberals in America, all you need to do is be under the age of 70, run for election and lose, and get Donald Trump to insult you one time. Boom! You are in the cabinet.
Well, it worked for Mayor Pete.
Exactly.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Perfect example again of just failing upwards. You've never seen someone fail upwards so hard in your life.
To be fair, and it was revealed that a healthcare company in a significant state was one of his clients when he worked for McKinsey. So this is apocryphal, but perfectly possible. He did do an excellent job helping Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Michigan really screw people.
I've got to familiarize myself with that particular case. I didn't know about it. It doesn't surprise me. That's all McKinsey does, but I didn't know about that.
Yeah, there was McKinsey was consulting with Blue Cross and Blue Shield around the same time that Pete was working there.
And
while the clients that were leaked were descriptors rather than names, the descriptor says, the descriptor fits Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Michigan. It could be other things too, but it fits that.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, this is tangential, but I feel like Pete Buttigieg is like the generation, and I think I'm probably like I think I'm around the same age as him, around the same generation that really, really, really like. I think he's smart enough where he can see and even say and process all the things we said maybe about the likes of Barack Obama and artifice and aesthetic over substance and things of that nature and stuff like that. He can see that, but he thinks it's inspiring. He's like, great, I can weaponize some small superficial like parts of my biography. Combine like marginalized identity with privileged position in other parts of my life and some like veil of pseudo intellectualism, and I could ride that for life. And they were inspired by that type of shit. Kamala Harris is not the same generation, but I think she has the same mode. This is not to open any kind of worms, but I think Tulsi Gabbard is very. She reminds me of that as well. You have people and Tulsi Gabbard as full-grown adults. Tulsi with like an elected official position, signing up to join a war that we knew was gone bad. And it just smacks me of like resume building.
Well, if you really want to get into the creepy, I was really not planning to go into the Tulsi conspiracy theories tonight, but
I opened the door.
Tulsi could be our final topic. Fuck.
There we go.
It's easy to open these up because there are so many of them. So first, her father is a state party, has been a state party boss in Hawaii for years and years and years and years and years. And his base is the religious right. And he is a homophobe and a transphobe and a racist. And that has been his political career. That Mike Gabbard's political career has really been all the worst elements of the religious right with a little bit of progressive sounding economic rhetoric. Tulsi Gabbard began her political career in her father's campaigns, grew up in a literal cult, which gets forgotten too long. She talks all the time about having left it, but plenty of people in her circle, including her brother and other family members, have not left the cult, are still in the cult. She associates with lots of people who are still in the cult. She turned down a donation from an American Front group for the RSS after she got caught taking the donation, because she got caught, not because she objected to the donation. She literally had pictures of her meeting with Modi during the presidential election on her presidential campaign page. And while her supporters swore that this wasn't raising money off her meeting with Modi, the donate button was right up in the corner over that picture.
Interesting.
So Tulsi Gabbard, and now she's gone full circle back from her so-called progressive turn back to being the sort of person who's perfectly comfortable going on Fox News and talking about anti-white racism. And whose last bill in Congress was literally the turf bill. I refuse to call it anything else. I know trans athletes. I know what the actual experience of athletes on hormones is directly from them. That's not as good as having been there, but that's closer than Tulsi Gabbard comes. And I just don't see the panic that is being whipped up here. The panic that's being whipped up is the locker room panic from the 80s that had people getting found not guilty for shooting somebody because, I thought he was gay and he hit on me. And I thought I would get AIDS. So I shot him. Really, that was self-defense, right? No. But I mean, that's the sort of panic that Tulsi jumped in on with the whole trans athletes thing. That totally unrealistic and completely not even from a realistic fear, but from a straight stereotype of queer people.
This will be my final thought because I know Elias has to get out of here soon.
Yes.
But since we're talking about Tulsi, I just want to say I've been trying to draw attention to the fact that there are people attempting to sheepdog potential leftists into being right-wing extremists. Tulsi Gabbard is, in my opinion, one of those people, and I don't mean that lightly. I mean that she's aware of it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And it is no coincidence, with that in mind, that we now find that a great deal of former Tulsi Gabbard supporters are anti-vax, are defending Kyle Rittenhouse, are doing all these other weird things and calling themselves leftists, calling themselves progressives. Don't buy into it. There are a lot of people out there that want to take advantage of your anger. They know that you're upset with the system. And if you don't have a clear solution out of the system, they will try to sell you the one that works best for them. So This is why I always say, read some goddamn theory, okay? I'm poor as shit. I read theory. I don't want to hear excuses. Everybody needs to read some theory in their life. Do it. That's my final thought.
I will say that I don't believe everyone has to read theory. However,
yes, but
everyone should talk about theory with someone who has, if they haven't read it themselves. People should watch old Soviet propaganda cartoons that explain theory if they don't want to read it.
Yeah, those are great. Those are just as good as anything else, honestly. Go for it. But get
I honestly think
and understand it so that these people can't take advantage of you and herd you over to something else. That's really what I want to get at. And
that's really what it comes down to. You have to understand why. No, you don't ever suggest that there is a legitimate self-defense if you're using violence to defend someone else's property.
Right.
Violence in defense of someone else's property just makes you a gun thug.
Premeditated, planned across state lines, right? Like, oh, how did I end up here?
Premeditated, planned
literal
across
outside
state lines.
Agitator.
Premeditated purchase of a weapon it was illegal for him to own and carry. Open carry in a state that does not allow minors to carry openly. And shooting at people for threatening someone else's jewelry store, allegedly.
Yep.
I mean, so when the Pinkertons shot at people defending other people's jewelry stores, they called them gun thugs and not cops. But now we call our cops cops.
Yeah. Well, I know this isn't the happiest note to be kind of trying to wrap things on, but Elias, we appreciate your time and being here tonight. I know you have to go soon. Do you have any final thoughts and anything you want to promote? Just anything you want to share with the audience before you get out of here? Could be anything.
I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I've had a great time. It was an honor to be on. A lot of fun. Learned a lot. Come on anytime y'all want me. Yeah, we got a lot of new pieces coming up at my Substack. My Substack is completely free. I have mostly essays going up there. Every once in a while, I'll feature an interview that's deconstructing consent, is what I call it. And then we have like a companion podcast that I'm getting going as well. And that's at my name, Elias Cepeda.substack.com. It's EliasCepeda.substack.com. And yeah, check that out. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, this was a real pleasure.
You.
I mean, I've been looking forward to this for a while. I always love interacting with you on Twitter. And I hope everybody out there goes give a follow.
And you said that on the air, so I'm probably going to hold you to that anytime thing and ask you again. So consider yourself.
Let me know. I appreciate it. Yeah, anytime at all, gentlemen.
We appreciate that. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks.
And to all our loyal watchers who do occasionally show up, and I see that we're not completely alone. I thank you, and we'll tweet at you.